Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. In today's episode, Paul welcomes back Paul Levy to talk about his latest book, Undreaming Wetiko, Breaking the Spell of the Nightmare Mind Virus. A pioneer in the field of spiritual emergence, Paul is a wounded healer in private practice, helping others who are also awakening to the dreamlike nature of reality. His work has gone through 3 phases. Because of his intense interest in dreams, both night dreams and the dreamlike nature of reality, he was first known as the Dream Guy. After writing Dispelling Wetiko, he became associated with the idea of Wetiko. After publication of The Quantum Revelation, he is now seen as connected with quantum physics. All 3 aspects, dreams, Wetiko, and quantum physics, are interconnected and complementary facets of a deeper reality into which he is continually deepening his investigation. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. Your opinions matter, and your ratings help us to grow and help more people to be healthy, find freedom of body and mind, and to live their dreams. A big thank you to our sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Organifi, and our newest sponsors, Ned, Wild Pastures, and Peak Life. Their support is essential in producing this podcast, and we hope you will show your support by visiting them online and trying all the amazing products they produce. Now here are Paul Chek and Paul Levy talking about Undreaming Wetiko and Breaking the Spell of the Nightmare Mind Virus.
Paul Levy's back. I think this is his 4th time to be back with me. We're going to talk about his new book, which is really important because now he gives us the techniques and approach to heal ourselves of Wetiko, the mind virus. His new book is Undreaming Wetiko, the mind virus that infects humanity. Got it right here in my hand. I've been studying it. And welcome back, Paul.
Yeah, hey, it's just so great to be here with you, Paul. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, my pleasure. And I must say, man, I don't know how you do it, but you keep writing all these super good books. And I'm always amazed at how good you write. And I've been diving into the book to kind of get my teeth into it so I could really sense what it is that you've been writing about. And I've got to tell you, what I did is I got the audio book so I could listen while I was in the gym because I don't have a lot of time for reading these days. My soul directed me to your chapter on shamanism, and it's absolutely excellent. The whole book's excellent. I've looked through it, but wow, did you ever nail the whole shamanic approach to this? Friggin' incredible.
Well, yeah, no, thank you. Well, the thing which is really trippy is that I finished that chapter like it was probably 2 weeks before the lockdown happened. And I was talking about that we as a species are going through the shamanic descent into the darkness of the unconscious and going through the archetypal death rebirth. And little did I realize how prescient I was being, because then the lockdown happened and it just got even crazier and wilder, the whole shamanic aspect of it. And I point out that we're being called, all of us, each one of us are being called to be potential shamans. And I really go into what that means.
Yeah, well, you did a great job. I mean, I've studied shamanism inside and out and I've practiced it for a long, long time. And Angie's a highly qualified shaman. I don't know if you remember, but she did 3 years of advanced training with Michael Harner through the Institute of Shamanic Studies.
Right.
And so because I was involved with her through all her training and learning, from her the kinds of things they were learning, and my life of studying it, I can listen to your chapter or read it with enough depth to really hear what you're saying. And I was just ever amazed. I was listening to it literally as I was eating lunch today, and I'm probably almost finished with it, but it's just like, wow, you hit the nail on the head. It's just such a beautiful encapsulation of shamanism. And it was kind of funny for me because one of the problems that we have is frequently when we try to hire a nanny to watch our kids, they'll spend a day. We learn to make sure they spend a day first before they say, yes, I'll take the job. Because what's happened many times is they turn out to be Christians and they find out that I have 2 wives and they think that that's of the devil. What happened just recently, like a few days ago, we hired this girl. She spent the day. She loved the kids. She loved the place. She was up for it. Then she had one more day, and she just happened to search Angie's name on the internet and found one of Angie's videos on shamanism, and then wrote a text to us saying she quit because shamanism is devil worship and she can't have anything to do with it. I'm like, oh God, here we go again. So the girl's only 18, but I'm listening to your chapter and going, this is what this young girl needs to hear. I wrote back to her and said, look, we practice nature shamanism. We practice working with the elements and helping people free themselves from trauma and negative stuff,
Right.
and but she was so brainwashed already, she could have nothing to do with it. And so we lost her. So I was, after having gone through that experience, I'm listening to your chapter going, I mean, everybody in the world needs to understand what shamanism really is. And the other crazy thing about shamanism is that, I've studied the history of all the world's religions, and I have an amazing 2-volume set by Major General Forlong that was written in about 1897. And he was a British general that traveled all over the world studying the history of religion everywhere he went. Produced this each volume's like 700 pages, but he has a map of the history of all the world religions going all the way back to the beginning of recorded time with human writing, pictograms and things like that. And it shows clearly shamanism is the mainstream that flows into and creates all the religions. And yet you have all these religions that think shamanism is evil, and they don't realize that their religions grew out of shamanism.
Right, right. Well, in that chapter, I talk about that shamanism. It is really at the root of, like, any of the religions or like psychotherapy. The shaman is the creative artist. The shaman is the storyteller. They're the dreamer. And it's such an existential primordial source of us as a species, of what we do and how we express ourselves. Yeah, like that story you told about the 18-year-old woman. I mean, I get that so fully, where people, they get into a fixed point of view and they literally become sort of in this brainwashed state. And that's something, I would love to talk more about just in general in the greater body politic. And then there's no, it's like they're under a spell. And that's in essence what you just described with that one person. That's like an instantiation of the collective spell of, like, it's like we're in a fairy tale and we as a species are under a collective spell. And then the question becomes, well, how do we wake up? How do we break the spell? And the shamanic thing, keep in mind, I'm not writing as a scholar. Yeah, I'm a nerd and I love to study stuff, but because of just my own personal experiences, this is like in the early 80s, I realized, oh my God, I've gotten sort of drafted into a deeper shamanic process, that mapped onto exactly the archetypal pattern of what happens when,
The wounded healer, yeah.
yeah, the wounded healer is the shaman. I mean, really, they're equivalent terms. And so what I write about in that chapter, and I think that's the biggest chapter in the whole book, because I have so much to say about it, because we're all being called to step into being, it's like we're shamans in training and we're being, invited to really step into that. And interesting, you mentioned Harner, Michael Harner, who I used to go and hang out with because I used to
Cool.
work in New York City. I was the Young Foundation. I was the bookstore manager. And I realized, oh, Harner was, I think he was a professor at one of the universities in New York. And I just called him up and said, hey, I'm a big fan of your work. Can I go and, can I meet with you? So we met a number of times and I was describing to him, my process. And he was so helpful because he was helping me to understand the shamanic, deeper, like, structure of what was going on. And he says something really interesting in his writings. In one of his interviews, he says there are two dangers of shamanism. One is somebody to have just this little bit of experience with, like, the powers and principalities and put up a shingle and go, oh, I'm a shaman. And, they can do incredible damage to themselves and other people. But the other great danger, he says, is for us to remain unconscious of our intrinsic shamanic abilities. And that really, when I heard him say that, I'm like, I just heard the truth of that, because we're all so sensitive and empathic. And to the extent that we're not connected consciously with those gifts, then that becomes poison.
It does, but it's also poison that we project out onto other people and attack them, not realizing it's our own unmet healing process that we're avoiding.
Right. And that's a way of describing Wetiko. Like psychologically, I'll talk about like scapegoating and projecting the shadow is the psychological dynamic that underlies the whole Wetiko epidemic. And what's playing out in the world, just to be clear, is a collective psychosis. That is what Wetiko is. It is a psychic epidemic. And psychologically speaking, at the root of that is exactly what you just said, is projecting the shadow onto somebody out there.
Right. You've devoted a tremendous amount of time and energy to write this trilogy on Wetiko, the mind virus that has us all. Because some of the listeners may have not listened to our previous podcast together, if you could just sort of encapsulate what Wetiko is to put the kind of lay the foundation. But I'd also like to know why. I mean, I think I know, but I'd like the listeners to know why you've put so much energy. I mean, I know how much work it is to write a book. I've written 11 and I'm working on a 6-volume set right now. And even a 200-page book is a lot of work. And you've written 3 volumes on Wetiko. So what is Wetiko and why have you put the effort to write 3 books on it?
I guess the first thing I want to say, in the Castaneda books, Carlos's teacher says to him, he didn't have the name Wetiko, but he was pointing at exactly Wetiko. He called it a number of different names, like the predator being one. He says, for shamans, this is the topic of topics.
Yes.
In other words, there's nothing more important. This is Wetiko is at the root. It's this virus of the mind. And it's at the root of the collective madness that we're playing out and of the incredible evil that's manifesting in our world. And when people hear a mind virus idea, they, some people, oh, that sounds woo-woo or new agey or, crazy or whatever. But in essence, all that it's meaning is that the source and the solution of the madness, of the collective madness that's playing out, is to be found within the human psyche. That's in essence what I'm pointing out. And so the idea of Wetiko, it's a Native American term, and, they call it either, cannibal sickness or the sickness of exploitation. And it's really the source of the greatest evil, and what I'm pointing out, because I have a big chapter on quantum physics and Wetiko, I point out that Wetiko is a quantum phenomena. And that's to say that just like light is a wave or a particle, depending on how it's observed, Wetiko is the source of the greatest evil, and it's actually the greatest catalyst for human evolution that we've ever known, that it's actually helping us to wake up. It's a superposition of states, and how it manifests, either it's going to, it's going to help us awaken, or it's going to take us down and kill us. How it manifests depends on if we recognize what it's showing us. That Wetiko is like this living like revelation. But it's a revelation through the dark. It's not like a revelation from on high through the heavens. Like, think about Christ 2,000 years ago. He descended, from above. No, Wetiko, it's a revelation that's coming from the depths, from through the darkness. And so the thing is, it operates through the blind spots and through the projective tendencies of the mind, such that we literally entrance ourselves through the genius of our own superhero power of co-creating our reality, because we're literally creating our experience moment by moment. No one else is doing that. We're doing that. What Wetiko does, it plugs into that intrinsic ability, and we hypnotize ourselves so that our own creative genius gets turned against us in a way that's killing us. And I'm describing both individually and collectively. That's what we're doing as a species.